In the shadow of the Cold War, long after the world turned its attention away from Southeast Asia, a quiet but deadly conflict raged across the Thai-Cambodian border. It was a war without declarations, without front lines, and often without witnesses. From 1979 to 1989, Vietnam launched repeated border raids into Thai territory, targeting Cambodian resistance forces sheltered near or within Thai borders. What began as a pursuit of retreating Khmer Rouge guerrillas quickly escalated into a tense military standoff that would last for a decade. This is the untold story of artillery duels, cross-border incursions, and the secret war that nearly pulled Thailand into a wider conflict. It is a story of Cambodian guerrillas trapped between superpowers, of Thai civilians caught under rocket fire, and of a region destabilized by unresolved wars. In this three-part documentary, we expose how Vietnam, after toppling the Khmer Rouge, waged a relentless campaign against all forms of Cambodian resistance, at the cost of peace on the Thai border. Part 1. Collapse in Cambodia. Vietnam invades, resistance escapes. The seeds of the Vietnamese border raids were planted in January 1979. After years of escalating hostilities with Pol Pot's Khmer Rouge regime, Vietnam launched a full-scale invasion of Cambodia. The goal was to end the genocidal rule of the Khmer Rouge, who had murdered nearly 2 million Cambodians in just 4 years. Vietnam's People's Army advanced rapidly, toppling Phnom Penh and installing a new government, the People's Republic of Kampuchea (PRK), led by defectors from the Khmer Rouge such as Heng Samrin and Hun Sen. But while the fall of the Khmer Rouge was swift, the end of the war was not. The Khmer Rouge, along with other anti-Vietnamese resistance groups like the Royalist Phon Simpec and the Republican KPNLF, Khmer People's National Liberation Front, retreated westward toward the dense jungles and mountainous borderlands that separated Cambodia from Thailand. These remote zones became the last bastions of armed resistance where guerrilla warfare could be sustained indefinitely. Thousands of fighters, joined by civilians fleeing the Vietnamese occupation, crossed into Thai territory or camped along the border in semi-controlled zones. The Thai government, officially neutral, allowed some of these groups to operate or receive international aid. China, the United States, and ASEAN viewed Vietnam's occupation as a threat to regional balance and covertly supported the resistance movements, particularly the non-communist ones. But Vietnam saw these border zones differently. To Hanoi, they were a threat to its new regime in Phnom Penh, dangerous sanctuaries from which the Khmer Rouge and other enemies could regroup, receive foreign support, and launch raids into Cambodia. Determined to crush all opposition, Vietnam began a ruthless strategy: cross-border raids into Thai soil, targeting Cambodian resistance camps, supply lines, and refugee settlements. The first of these raids began quietly in 1979. Vietnamese artillery units began shelling suspected guerrilla encampments near the border, accusing Thailand of harboring Pol Potist reactionaries. Thai border villages came under fire. Refugee camps, some housing tens of thousands of Khmer civilians, were struck. Thai military units rushed to reinforce the frontier. It was not long before what Vietnam called hot pursuit turned into sustained border warfare. Between 1979 and 1981, Vietnamese forces launched dozens of raids across the Thai border. Using both conventional infantry and elite special forces, they moved deep into Thai territory, often 5 to 10 kilometers past the border. Their targets were not only guerrilla fighters, but also logistics hubs and arms depots suspected of supplying the Cambodian resistance. Thai military outposts, unprepared for such aggression, were quickly reinforced. Bangkok issued formal protests and mobilized its border defense units. Public opinion in Thailand, already hostile to Vietnam's growing regional ambitions, turned sharply against Hanoi. The Thai government accused Vietnam of violating international law and risking full-scale war. The Vietnamese, however, justified their actions by claiming that Thailand had forfeited its neutrality by allowing guerrilla forces to operate freely from its soil. Hanoi insisted that it was not attacking Thailand, but merely defending Cambodia from destabilization. But as the shelling increased and civilians on both sides were killed, it became clear that this was no longer a limited pursuit. It was a dangerous military stalemate. At the heart of the conflict were the Cambodian resistance factions. The Khmer Rouge, despite being one of the most notorious regimes in modern history, had managed to survive in exile. Backed covertly by China and tolerated by Thailand, they rebuilt their bases in the jungles of the Dangrek Mountains and the Cardamom Range. Their leader, Pol Pot, was still alive and still in command, though weakened and increasingly sidelined by younger commanders like Ta Mok and Sun Sen. Meanwhile, the non-communist resistance also gained momentum. Prince Norodom Sihanouk's Funsenpek attracted royalist sympathizers and received backing from ASEAN and the West. The KPNLF, led by Sun San, appealed to moderate Republicans and Cambodian exiles. These groups formed the basis of what became known as the Coalition Government of Democratic Kampuchea, CGDK, a loose alliance of factions opposed to the Vietnamese-backed regime in Phnom Penh. Vietnam treated all three groups as enemies. To Hanoi, it did not matter whether resistance came from communists, monarchists, or liberal Zini. Opposition to the PRK was unacceptable. As such, Vietnamese cross-border operations targeted all factions indiscriminately. Camps were shelled with mortar and rockets. Vietnamese commandos infiltrated refugee areas to assassinate key figures. Bridges, roads, and supply trucks on the Thai side of the border were sabotaged. For the Thai military, this presented a security nightmare. The border was over 700 kilometers long, stretching from Trat in the south to Surin and Sa Kaeo in the north. Thai villages near Eranuprathet, Chong Mek, and Ban Nong Chan became flat. Refugee camps like Koa Dang, Nong Chan, and Site 2 were caught in the crossfire. Thai civilians began demanding government action to protect their homes and livelihoods. In response, Thailand deployed the Border Patrol Police (BPP), Royal Thai Army units, and air defense systems to the frontier. Thai artillery returned fire when Vietnamese shells landed on their side. In some cases, Thai jets and helicopters were scrambled to chase off Vietnamese ground forces. Tensions rose to dangerous levels, especially in 1981 and 1983, when Thai-Vietnamese border clashes came close to full-scale engagements. Despite this, neither side declared war. The conflict remained undeclared, unofficial, and largely hidden from global headlines. The world was focused on the Cold War, on Afghanistan, the Iran-Iraq War, and rising tensions in Eastern Europe. Southeast Asia's Forgotten Front drew little attention outside intelligence circles and regional diplomacy. Yet for those living on the Thai-Cambodian frontier, war was daily reality. For Cambodian civilians, the decade was one of endless displacement. Over 300,000 Cambodians lived in refugee camps along the Thai border, many for the entire duration of the 1980s. Some were caught between two fires, suspected of being Khmer Rouge sympathizers by Vietnam and seen as burdens by the Thai state. Others were forcibly recruited into guerrilla armies or denied access to humanitarian aid, depending on which faction controlled their camp. International NGOs and UN agencies tried to intervene, providing food, shelter, and medical care to the refugees, but Vietnamese raids often struck dangerously close to these humanitarian zones, drawing condemnation from the international community. One of the worst incidents occurred in 1984, when Vietnamese forces shelled a refugee area near Nong Chan, killing dozens of civilians and injuring foreign aid workers. Still, the raids continued. In Hanoi's view, peace would only come when Cambodia was fully pacified and no threat remained from guerrilla resistance. In Bangkok's eyes, the Vietnamese occupation of Cambodia was illegitimate and Thailand had the right to support resistance movements that sought to restore Cambodia's independence. Caught in the middle were the Cambodian people, who paid the price in blood, displacement, and despair. By the mid-1980s, however, the conflict began to shift in scope. Vietnam's military occupation of Cambodia was becoming increasingly costly, both financially and Soviet aid was flowing, but not without limits. Cambodia's PRK government remained internationally unrecognized, and Vietnamese forces faced constant ambushes, minefields, and jungle warfare. Resistance groups, though divided, were surviving. Thailand's military had also modernized. Better surveillance, upgraded artillery, and regional alliances with the US and ASEAN allowed it to better monitor and respond to cross-border threats. Internationally, pressure was growing on Vietnam to withdraw from Cambodia and allow the country to form a new, neutral government. But none of this stopped the raids. In fact, the most intense period of shelling and pursuit was yet to come. Part 2. Fire across the border, K5 Plan, and the clashes of the mid-1980s. By 1984, 5 years into Vietnam's military occupation of Cambodia, Hanoi was facing a strategic dilemma. Despite controlling the capital, Phnom Penh, and much of the Cambodian lowlands, Vietnam had been unable to destroy the resistance movements that lurked near the Thai border. These guerrilla factions, including the Khmer Rouge, KPNLF, and Funsimpekwa, launching frequent raids into government-held territory and harassing supply lines. Vietnam responded with one of the most infamous military projects in Southeast Asian history, the K5 Plan, named after the Fifth National Plan of the People's Republic of Kampuchea. The K5 initiative was a massive military engineering project aimed at sealing off Cambodia's western border with Thailand, stretching from the Cardamom Mountains in the south to the Dangrek Range in the north. The K5 defense belt included minefields, barbed wire, trenches, bunkers, deforestation zones, and military outposts. Vietnamese engineers and thousands of Cambodian conscripts, many forced into labor work, to construct this deadly wall. Its purpose was simple: prevent Cambodian resistance forces from retreating to Thailand or receiving cross-border support. But in practice, the K5 plan turned the Cambodian-Thai border into a war zone. Vietnam stationed tens of thousands of troops along the belt, supported by tanks, artillery, and patrols. They began launching ever more aggressive raids across the frontier, striking not only guerrilla positions but also Thai military outposts and civilian villages suspected of supporting resistance efforts. The mid-1980s saw some of the most intense cross-border clashes between Vietnam and Thailand. In 1984-85, Vietnamese forces pushed hard to capture guerrilla strongholds in western Cambodia. When resistance groups retreated into Thailand as they had done for years, Vietnamese units followed them. Vietnamese artillery rained down on camps near Aranya Prathit, Ban Nong Chan, and along the Sangkla Buri corridor. Mortar shells landed inside Thai sovereign territory, destroying property and killing civilians. On multiple occasions, Vietnamese infantry even crossed the border to carry out hot pursuit attacks. Thailand responded with force. The Royal Thai Army reinforced its entire eastern frontier. Helicopters and fighter jets were placed on standby, and Thai artillery units were ordered to return fire whenever their territory was struck. Border clashes escalated into firefights involving dozens, sometimes hundreds, of soldiers. At times, it seemed the region was on the brink of a new regional war. One of the most infamous incidents occurred in November 1984, when Vietnamese troops crossed into Thailand near Nang Chan in Sa Kaeo province. Their target was a KPNLF-controlled refugee camp, which they accused of harboring weapons and guerrilla fighters. The Vietnamese shelled the camp with artillery before storming across the border. Thai forces rushed to repel the incursion. A fierce firefight broke out. At least 50 people were killed, including several Thai border guards and Cambodian civilians. The camp was burned. Thailand lodged a formal protest with Hanoi and began moving additional troops into the region. Vietnam denied any wrongdoing. claiming its troops had acted in self-defense, but the message was clear. Vietnam would not tolerate cross-border support for Cambodian resistance. Meanwhile, the resistance factions themselves were not passive. The Khmer Rouge, now rebuilt into a formidable guerrilla force, conducted raids against Vietnamese military convoys, sabotaged the K5 defense wall, and planted mines across border trails. Their bases, located just inside Cambodian territory near the Thai border, became launching pads for asymmetric attacks. Phun Sen Pech and the KPNLF, though ideologically opposed to the Khmer Rouge, also stepped up operations. They trained fighters, smuggled weapons, and coordinated with Thai intelligence officers. While the factions remained divided in leadership, they occasionally cooperated in field operations, especially when Vietnamese offensives threatened to wipe them out. This uneasy alliance of resistance groups received growing international attention. The United States, still engaged in Cold War competition with the Soviet bloc, saw an opportunity. Although officially opposing the Khmer Rouge, Washington quietly supported the non-communist factions and funneled aid through covert channels. China, eager to punish Vietnam for its Soviet alignment, increased its support for the Khmer Rouge, sending weapons through Thailand. ASEAN nations, led by Thailand, Malaysia, and Singapore, formed a regional bloc that refused to recognize the Vietnamese-backed PRK government in Phnom Penh. Diplomatically, Vietnam was isolated, but militarily, it held firm. The K5 plan, brutal as it was, began to take effect. By 1986, Vietnamese forces had built a network of fortifications and surveillance posts that drastically limited the mobility of resistance fighters. Minefields along the Cambodian side of the Thai border turned vast swaths of jungle into death traps. At least 2 million mines were laid, many of them remaining active even decades later. Cambodian civilians, forced to build this deadly wall, suffered immensely. Poorly equipped, overworked, and often unpaid, conscripts died of malaria, starvation, or mine explosions. Entire villages were emptied for the sake of military construction. The K5 belt became known among Cambodians as the Second Killing Fields. But even as the wall tightened, the border raids did not stop. Vietnamese artillery continued to pound Thai territory in retaliation for guerrilla incursions. Thailand, in turn, increased support to the resistance factions, allowing them to operate from within safe zones near the border. The violence became cyclical and predictable. Guerrilla attack, Vietnamese retaliation, Thai protest, and international silence. In 1986, a particularly deadly series of raids near Phunam Ron and Chong Mek brought Thai-Vietnamese tensions to their peak. Over the course of several weeks, Vietnamese artillery units launched dozens of shells into Thai territory, striking a refugee encampment and damaging civilian homes. Thai forces responded with counter-battery fire, and both sides exchanged live fire across the border. Thailand put its air force on alert and issued a stern warning to Hanoi. The Thai Prime Minister at the time declared that any further incursion would be treated as an act of war. For a brief moment, ASEAN diplomats feared a full-scale regional conflict. However, cooler heads prevailed. Vietnam sent a back-channel apology, stating the artillery strikes were miscalculations and both sides returned to their tense status quo. But the damage was done. Thousands of Thai citizens along the border had been displaced by the shelling. Cambodian refugees were traumatized, forced to flee yet again. International NGOs protested the danger to aid workers and demanded the protection of civilian zones. The United Nations, though limited in influence during the Cold War, began investigating the refugee crisis and Vietnam's role in cross-border violence. Reports emerged of civilians killed by artillery fire, of landmines near Thai farms, and of children caught in crossfire during raids. Still, global powers hesitated to intervene directly. The Cold War logic prevailed. The enemy of my enemy is my friend, and in this case, the Cambodian resistance, no matter how fractured or imperfect, represented opposition to Vietnamese expansionism. which was viewed as a Soviet-backed threat to Southeast Asia. In this environment, Thailand continued to walk a tightrope. Publicly, it called for peace, neutrality, and respect for its borders. Privately, it coordinated with guerrilla leaders, shared intelligence, and allowed humanitarian aid to flow into resistance zones. The border thus remained both a battleground and a lifeline, one that kept the resistance alive, but kept the region unstable. By the late 1980s, both sides were exhausted. Vietnam had spent nearly a decade fighting an unwinnable war, both inside Cambodia and across its western border. Its economy was collapsing. Its soldiers, stretched thin across Cambodia, faced demoralization and desertion. Soviet aid, once generous, was starting to wane as reforms took hold in Moscow under Gorbachev. Thailand, too, had paid a price. Its eastern provinces were militarized. Its citizens lived under constant threat of cross-border violence. Refugees were everywhere, more than 300,000 Cambodians at the peak of the crisis, and social tensions were rising. Something had to give, and in 1987, the first signs of de-escalation began to appear. Vietnam, recognizing the limits of its occupation, opened diplomatic channels with ASEAN. Peace talks began, brokered by Indonesia and France. The United Nations launched new initiatives to resolve the Cambodia crisis, and discussions began about a future neutral Cambodia, free from Vietnamese control but also protected from the return of the Khmer Rouge. But the border was still dangerous. Even as peace talks continued, raids and shelling persisted. Resistance groups refused to lay down arms until Vietnam withdrew. Vietnam insisted on destroying the resistance before pulling out. Thai military commanders remained on high alert, even as diplomats exchanged handshakes in Jakarta and Geneva. As 1988 approached, the world began to sense a turning point. Part 3. Withdrawal, Wounds, and the Lingering Legacy. By the late 1980s, Vietnam's long occupation of Cambodia was nearing its breaking point. A decade of war had drained Hanoi's economy, strained its alliances, and cost tens of thousands of Vietnamese and Cambodian lives. Within Cambodia, Vietnamese troops were bogged down in an unrelenting guerrilla war. Along the Thai-Cambodian border, the so-called buffer zone had become a hellscape of shell craters, minefields, and devastated refugee camps. But now, international pressure was mounting. The Soviet Union, Vietnam's most critical backer, was undergoing major changes under Mikhail Gorbachev's policies of glasnost and perestroika. Soviet aid to Vietnam was being cut. The Cold War was thawing. Global leaders, from the United Nations to ASEAN, began pushing for a comprehensive political settlement to the Cambodian crisis. In 1988, Vietnam made its move. It announced the phased withdrawal of its 100,000 remaining troops from Cambodia to the outside world. This was hailed as a hopeful sign, but along the border with Thailand, it triggered a dangerous chain reaction. Resistance groups feared that with the Vietnamese exit, Cambodia might fall back into civil war, worse, be retaken by the Khmer Rouge. The Khmer Rouge, in turn, saw an opportunity to reassert dominance. Clashes between rival resistance factions increased. The Vietnamese, determined not to leave behind chaos, launched a final wave of offensives in early 1989, and once again, the border flared with violence. Even as Vietnamese troops began retreating, they continued striking across the Thai frontier, hitting suspected resistance staging grounds one last time. Shelling resumed in Sa Kaeo and Surin provinces, igniting fires that destroyed refugee shelters and wounded Thai civilians. Mines were laid or triggered along trails used by aid groups. Thai outposts along the Dangrek Mountains came under brief but intense fire. In February 1989, one of the last major cross-border engagements occurred near Ban Ta Freya, a quiet town on the Thai side of the border. Vietnamese forces shelled a series of guerrilla bases just kilometers from Thai soil. But in the confusion, several artillery shells landed inside Thailand, striking a civilian checkpoint and killing 2 villagers. The Thai military fired back with artillery and light armor, and the brief exchange lasted several hours. It was the final crescendo of a hidden war that had dragged on for a decade. On September 26, 1989, the last Vietnamese troops officially left Cambodia, crossing back into Vietnam after more than 10 years of occupation. Their departure marked the end of the longest and most deadly regional conflict in post-war Southeast Asia, but their legacy remained, a landscape of scars. Across Cambodia's western border, the war had left deep physical and emotional scars. Over 300,000 Cambodian refugees remained in limbo on Thai soil, packed into sprawling camps like Site 2, Site B, and Kao I Dang. These makeshift cities had been alternately protected and bombed over the years, places of both survival and trauma. Many of these refugees had seen their villages destroyed, their family members killed by shelling or mines. Thailand, caught between humanitarian compassion and national security, struggled to manage the crisis. Local communities near the border were overwhelmed. Landmines rendered large areas of farmland unusable. Thai civilians lived in constant fear that the conflict might reignite. Some had lost their homes, others their loved ones. The K5 minefields laid by Vietnamese and PRK forces during the war became one of the deadliest legacies of the occupation. Many of these mines had been placed just meters from the Thai border. For decades after the conflict, both Cambodians and Thais would be maimed or killed by mines originally intended to stop guerrillas from fleeing west. Even today, landmine clearance continues in provinces like Adar Mianchi, Palin, and Banti Mianchia, tragic reminder of a conflict long over but never forgotten. A war of shadows and lies. What makes the 1979-99 border war so difficult to reckon with is how secretive and quiet it was. Unlike the Vietnam War or the US invasion of Iraq, this conflict received very little global media attention, yet it involved Vietnamese regulars, Thai armed forces, Khmer Rouge insurgents, Chinese weapons, US aid, and Soviet-backed militaries, a Cold War proxy war in every sense. Each side denied involvement. Vietnam insisted that all shelling of Thailand was accidental or provoked. Thailand claimed neutrality while secretly supporting guerrillas and coordinating with foreign powers. The Khmer Rouge denied using Thai territory, despite photographic and eyewitness evidence. Even the United States, whose aid flowed to anti-Vietnamese resistance, kept quiet about its deeper involvement. It was a war hidden behind a curtain of silence, but for those who lived through it, villages in the east, Cambodian families in the camps, and Vietnamese soldiers patrolling minefields, it was anything but silent. The shelling, the panic, the chaos, and the grief were real. Burned out forests, craters in the soil, and mass graves in no man's land still testify to what occurred along that invisible line in the jungle. A diplomatic reckoning. Following the Vietnamese withdrawal, regional diplomacy accelerated. In 1991, the Paris Peace Accords were signed by all Cambodian factions, including Vietnam, Thailand, and the major resistance groups. The United Nations launched a historic peacekeeping mission, UNTA, to oversee elections, disarm militias, and rebuild Cambodia's shattered infrastructure. Thailand played a major role in this transition. The Thai government shifted from secretive support for guerrillas to becoming a key diplomatic and economic partner in Cambodia's reconstruction. Refugee camps were dismantled, and many Cambodians were repatriated. Thai businesses began investing in Cambodian tourism, agriculture, and real estate, but some wounds never healed. The Khmer Rouge, empowered by a decade of covert support and protected by Thai border zones, continued to fight into the late 1990s, even as Cambodia democratized. Splinter factions of the old regime used the jungles along the border to wage insurgency, sabotage infrastructure, and destabilize efforts at peace. Only in 1998, with the final surrender of remaining Khmer Rouge leaders, did the guns fall silent for good. Who was the aggressor? historians continue to debate who bears ultimate responsibility for the 1979–89 Thai-Vietnamese border clashes. From a Cambodian perspective, Vietnam was both liberator and occupier, a nation that ousted Pol Pot but stayed too long and brought suffering to civilians through forced conscription, military repression, and violent border operations. From the Thai point of view, Vietnam was the aggressor, repeatedly violating sovereign territory and endangering Thai citizens. Thai officials argue they had no choice but to support Cambodian resistance factions despite their murky past says, a way to protect Thailand and regional balance. Vietnam, for its part, claims it was fighting a war of national security, seeking to neutralize genocidal remnants of the Khmer Rouge and prevent Chinese encirclement. But its own actions, such as the creation of puppet regimes, K5 atrocities, and indiscriminate shelling, undermine that justification. The truth lies somewhere in the middle, but what's undeniable is that Cambodia once again was the battlefield for other powers' ambitions. Her people paid the highest price, her jungles became graveyards, and her sovereignty was torn between occupation and proxy war, the lessons of a forgotten war. Today, the Thai-Cambodian border is largely peaceful. Trade flows across modern highways. Tourists cross from Aranupathat into Poi Phet without a second thought. Border disputes still occasionally flare, especially around historical sites like Preah Vihear, but nothing on the scale of the 1980s chaos has returned. Yet the ghosts of the war remain. Cambodian farmers still plow fields with metal detectors in hand. Thai villagers still remember the sirens, the shells, the gunfire that echoed through the trees. Veterans on all sides, Vietnamese, Thai, Khmer, live with physical and emotional scars. This was a war without front-page headlines, a war without grand victory parades, a war that was, in many ways, invisible to the world, but not to those who lived it, and not to history. History never stays silent. The decade-long border war between Vietnam and Thailand wasn't just about geography, it was about ideology, survival, and sovereignty. In the shadows of the Cold War, Cambodia became a frontline not just of conflict, but of competing truths. Whether remembered or forgotten, history leaves its imprint, in shattered temples, in rusted mines, and in the memories of those who survived. Thank you for watching. If you found this story important, don't forget to like, share, and subscribe for more deep dives into the untold chapters of Southeast Asian history. And as always, history echoes across generations. Learn it, share it, never forget it. See you next time.